In a vast and unforgiving universe where power shifts like the shifting sands of Arrakis, alliances are forged and broken, and destinies collide amidst the chaos. Welcome to the epic saga of Dune, where ancient prophecies intertwine with political machinations, and the fate of worlds hangs in the balance. Join us as we delve into the intricate tapestry of Part 1 and Part 2, exploring the journey of Paul Atreides as he navigates the treacherous sands of the desert planet, embraces his destiny as the prophesied Messiah, and confronts the dark forces that seek to control the universe. Welcome to Dune, Part 1. In the year 10191, the cruel Harkonnen occupy the planet Arrakis to farm spice, the most valuable substance in the universe, which allows for space travel and has other life-extending properties. It's made them rich, and although the native tribes of Fremen try to resist the invaders, theirs is a guerrilla war that's not making much progress. But one day, the Emperor orders them to leave and sends a herald to the good guys, House Atreides, where the noble Duke Leto is given an imperial decree to replace his Harkonnen enemies as the new stewards of Arrakis. House Atreides accepts, sealing themselves into the pact under the witness of the Spacing Guild and a Reverend Mother of the Bene Gesserit Order, who manipulates politics by providing wives and concubines to the royal houses. Lady Jessica, Duke Leto's concubine, has been teaching their son Paul the secret ways of the Bene Gesserit, including aggressive hypnotic suggestions that can make people perform actions before they're even aware. Young Paul is surrounded by the finest, including Mentat Superminds and Gurney Halleck, who keeps the boy prepared at all times by attacking him like Cato, regardless of the mood. "You fight when the necessity arises," he says, testing Paul in the ways of shield and knife because he has a personal vendetta with the Harkonnen and knows just how bad things might get in their new life. They are brutal. Paul is a fine lad despite being in his emo phase, where he tells people he's had visions of their death, including Swordmaster Duncan Idaho, who isn't too bothered, and heads off to Arrakis early because Duke Leto suspects that this new appointment is really a trap set by the Emperor to force the Atreides and Harkonnen into a war that will weaken them both. He wants Duncan to open the path to a possible alliance with the Fremen on Arrakis. We need to cultivate desert power. Paul may have personal doubts, but Leto is a supportive father, as well as a galactic political figurehead. However, the truth is even worse. Over on the opulent Harkonnen homeworld of Giedi Prime, where a livid Rabban cries to his uncle about losing Arrakis, the huge Baron Harkonnen lets him in on the fact that the Emperor is actually directly helping them to lay a trap. When is a gift not a gift? Meanwhile, outside of the official delegation, the Bene Gesserit drop back in on Caladan for a secret midnight meeting. Paul gets a medical check from the family's doctor, Yue, and his mother's anxiety rides high despite her usual self-composure, because Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Moyam has come to test him. "Come here," she commands, holding him at a point to observe his self-control while enduring a box of pain to ensure he's a conscious human. An animal caught in a trap will gnaw off its own leg to escape. What will you do? Instead of a reactive animal, Paul demonstrates his control in an experience so full of neuro-linguistic anchors that it actually triggers his mind to level up and have visions that reflect his semi-prophetic dreaming. The Reverend Mother is also keen on hearing these visions, giving Jessica a slap on the wrist for having a son instead of a daughter. The Bene Gesserit have been secretly crossing bloodlines for centuries to bring forth the Kwisatz Haderach, a mind capable of bridging space and time to lead humanity to a better future. So no pressure or anything, but hey, it's time for everyone to pack up and ready their ships as House Atreides says goodbye to Caladan and passes through the folded space of a guild ship to land on Arrakis and make a good first impression. Peter de Vries is there to greet them with an intelligence report, while the locals call out for the Lisan al-Gaib, their version of a messiah that they recognize in Paul. Even out here on Dune, the Bene Gesserit have been busy implanting common religious superstitions that might give them an advantage further down the line. They fly over from the airfields to the baking squat city complex behind the shield walls and settle into their new desert life, where Leto's first priority is ensuring spice production and shipping it off-world. "To shower, you scrub your ass with sand, my lord," they say. While Jessica interviews a local keeper, she instantly recognizes one of them as a freeman, and also secretly armed. This crysknife is both a gift and a test, weighing her up to see if she matches the prophecy. Only Jessica's cold reading ability and the heat of the moment manage to keep things bloodless. Meanwhile, Paul gets a lesson on the sacred symbols of an old dream and the importance of water preservation, before studying up on the Fremen and their desert survival methods. He is interrupted by a Harkonnen assassination attempt as a tiny hunter-seeker scans for its target. Paul obscures his profile and relies on perfect stillness in the face of death. Thank God they took on that housekeeper. As master of assassins, Thufir Hawat is shamed by the security breach, though it's his training that kept Paul alive. Meanwhile, the Emperor's Reverend Mother heads to Giedi Prime for a different secret meeting, where she dismisses their creepy body horror project to confirm that the Emperor will be aiding them in the upcoming attack with his own Sardaukar army, while also requesting that Jessica and her son be exiled instead of killed. I give you my word, the Baron says. But really it's a lie by omission, because the desert takes the weak. My desert. My Arrakis. Peter de Vries heads over to Salusa Secundus to vibe out to some throat singing and pick up a few battalions of the most elite and dangerous fanatical killers in the known empire. Duncan Idaho has returned after making contact with the Fremen in the deep desert and reports that they number in the millions and fight like demons. He's brought one of their leaders over for a hello, called Stilgar, who immediately tests their response by getting a little too close but can ultimately see that Leto is keen to build bridges between their cultures, unlike the Harkonnens. Stilgar takes note of Paul as he leaves, but that's it for the good news. Despite having massive quotas to fill for spice production, it looks like the Atreides have been left with nothing but second-rate equipment. They meet with the judge of the change, Dr. Liet Kynes, the imperial ecologist, who gifts them still suits for desert survival. Are you Fremen? Paul asks. I am accepted in both Sietch and Village, she replies. They take a flight out to see the spice mining operation firsthand, as it harvests from the sandbed, while spottercraft keep an eye out for worm sign. These desert leviathans are always drawn to attack rhythmic vibrations, so it's about time for the carrier to lift them out of there. However, the hydraulics malfunction, turning the situation deadly with the now grounded harvester being minutes away from a wave of oncoming destruction. Leto doesn't hesitate and turns the tour guide into a rescue mission, ordering the workers to abandon the spice for the sake of their lives. Paul gets hit with a blow of raw spice that sends him into a trance before Gurney Halleck pulls him out for a near-death exit, giving them both a front-row seat as the giant sandworm emerges from the depths. The sandworm swallows the harvester whole. Back at base, Leto is angry at Paul for taking risks and furious at Kynes for turning an imperial blind eye to the fact that they've been set up to fail. Dr. Yue confirms that spice has psychoactive properties, and Paul tells Jessica about the visions he experienced, including a Freeman girl who either loves him or kills him, the importance of receiving a knife, and the clear knowledge that his mother is pregnant, something she has barely realized herself. This stresses Jessica out because if the Bene Gesserit are right about Paul's abilities, they're probably also right about there being no chance for Duke Leto's survival. The threat of their dire situation hangs over them like a shadow that's closer than any of them realize. That night, Dr. Yue sends everyone to sleep before taking out the guards and disabling the shield generators. Leto knows something is wrong and discovers the dying housekeeper, but he's too late as a dart drills through his body shield. Yue has betrayed House Atreides. Darkness took my wife. They take her apart like a doll, Yue laments. However, the traitor takes a moment to give Leto a poison gas tooth as a final shot at killing the Baron for himself. With the shields down, the Harkonnens begin their attack, pouring out of Guild's folded space and bombing the city. Over at the airfield, Gurney tries to get everything with guns off the ground, but the assault is too strong and too specialized, as the bombs slow down to slip past ship shields, and the entire Atreides fleet is destroyed. As the invading ground troops start to arrive, Gurney at least finds something he can do, and leads the army out to kill some Harkonnens in their final battle. Back in the city, the defenders hold their own against their sworn enemy, but the advanced techniques of the Imperial Sardaukar ensure the slaughter is complete. Only Duncan Idaho survives, stalking through the chaos to find his duke and family missing. He flexes his skills as a swordmaster, slicing his way through the Sardaukar a handful at a time, flicking off dart attacks like they're nothing. He kills his way over to an ornithopter to let off a little steam before getting the hell out of there, as a gunship laser beam cuts through half the city like butter. As Raban starts beheading captives, Leto comes around from his drug dose to discover that Baron Vladimir Harkonnen himself has arrived for a victory meal. Leto watches helplessly as the traitor Yue is marched in to get his reward. Lured in close by the final whispers of the Duke, the Baron gets a face full of revenge halitosis that kills Peter de Vries, along with everyone in the room. Paul and Jessica are being taken into the desert to die, but although one of the guards is deaf and she herself is gagged, Paul uses the voice to tip the scales in their favor. Jessica, freed from her bonds, quickly overpowers the remaining guards, proving her combat prowess. Paul and Jessica, ruthlessly commanding their captors to their deaths, narrowly escape being gutted. They discover that Yue had left them Freeman survival kits and a ruined city. As they camp in the sand, directly exposed to spice, Paul has another fit of visions. In these visions, he sees himself leveraging the religious indoctrination of the Freeman to start a holy war in revenge for his dead father, which escalates into a wave of galactic genocide in his name. Ravaged by the poison but ultimately surviving, Paul starts to accept his fate. Meanwhile, back at the ruined city, Dr. Liet Kynes is picked up by Duncan Idaho, who is furious at her for being neutral in the conflict. Following the Fremen kit beacon, Duncan finds Jessica and Paul and swears allegiance to the new Lord Duke. They take refuge with Kynes and her Freeman escort in an old ecological station from before the discovery of spice. Paul uses all his Bene Gesserit training and keen observation skills to discern Kynes' double life as a native and uses her values to win her over. Paul realizes that if Kynes testifies to the Emperor's involvement, it could provide enough blackmail to leverage Paul into imperial succession, turning him from a fugitive into a bold contender. As they prepare for their next move, the Sardaukar hunting them drop down in deadly silence. However, desert tactics belong to the Fremen, who spring into combat despite being outnumbered. The skirmish alerts Duncan, who seals the door and faces death bravely. He slices his way through the Sardaukar, proving himself one of the finest fighters in the Imperium. Despite being skewered, Duncan rises through sheer force of will, taking out a few more enemies before finally succumbing. Paul and Jessica flee through a network of tunnels to an escape ornithopter. Meanwhile, Kynes plans to summon a sandworm for escape, but is betrayed and fatally wounded by Imperial forces. As she dies, she makes peace with her fate and sets off a thumper, attracting a sandworm to her location to ensure she goes out on her own terms. Back in the desert, Paul and Jessica evade their pursuers by flying into a sandstorm. Paul's heightened awareness and visions guide them through the storm safely, while the Harkonnen ships are not so lucky. They eventually land and set off to find the Fremen. Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, confident that House Atreides is wiped out, orders Rabban to speed up spice production and eliminate all the Fremen. In the desert, as the storm subsides, Paul and Jessica crash land and begin their journey to find the Fremen, moving carefully to avoid attracting sandworms. Despite hearing voices and having visions along the way, they make it to solid ground just in time to evade a sandworm. Upon reaching the Fremen, Stilgar agrees to take Paul in, recognizing his potential but hesitates to accept Jessica. Jessica proves her worth by demonstrating her combat skills, earning both their protection. However, Fremen warrior Jamis challenges Paul, leading to a duel. Paul, armed with a sacred weapon given by Chani, the girl from his visions, ultimately kills Jamis, securing his place among the Fremen. Jessica wants to leave the planet, but Paul, understanding his father's vision for Arrakis, decides that their future lies with the Fremen. They join the Fremen and head deeper into the desert. As the movie ends, Paul witnesses a Fremen riding a sandworm, marveling at the power of the desert. Chani tells him that this is only the beginning, signaling the start of a new chapter in Paul's journey. Paul and Jessica, with no weapons and under Harkonnen's pursuit, fly into an oncoming sandstorm, which is widely considered a bad idea. As the 800-km/h winds try to tear them apart, Paul stops trying to fight it and instead rides the storm like a seed in the wind. Despite the peril, they manage to emerge from the top of the storm and glide off for a crash landing. They head for the safety of some rocks and don their still suits for the deep desert. In the presence of the giant sandworms, they walk without rhythm to avoid attracting attention. However, they eventually find themselves running for their lives due to some drum sand. The worm pursues them until another thumper lures it away, revealing they have been discovered by Fremen. Initially, the Fremen plan to kill them for their body's water, but Stilgar recognizes Paul as the Duke's son. Jessica promises a reward for getting them back to Caladan, but these are hard people with immediate needs. Jessica resets their expectations by taking Stilgar hostage with his own knife, while Paul grabs a higher vantage point with a gun to cover the crowd. This display of strength gains them safe passage with the tribe. Paul meets Chani, the girl from his visions, who calls him a little boy. However, Jamis, who feels humiliated, invokes ritual combat against Jessica, forcing Paul to stand in her place, as it is forbidden to fight a Bene Gesserit. Chani lends Paul her knife, the tooth of a sandworm, an icon of his visions. The duel begins, and despite Jamis being a cunning fighter, Paul soon responds to all his moves. When Paul awkwardly demands Jaime's yield, he realizes the duel is to the death. Having never taken a life before, Paul learns a vital lesson about survival. In the desert, he must be willing to kill. This act, though brutal, earns the respect of the Fremen. Jessica wants to leave the planet, but Paul's prescient visions dictate they must stay and join the Fremen, who have the secret to riding sandworms and harnessing desert power. This path leads them into great danger but also immense potential. As they integrate with the Fremen, Paul witnesses the awe-inspiring sight of a Freeman riding a sandworm, understanding that this is only the beginning of their journey. Welcome to Dune Part 2. Let's go under the orange glow of an Elden Ring. Stilgar is still taking his Freeman tribe back to their Seat, along with Paul and Jessica. They're still being hunted by the Harkonnens, who are now reaching deeper into the desert than ever before, but who have floated themselves up into a counterattack. That means it's suddenly rigging men, forcing Paul to get proactive instead of hiding whilst his mom covers his back. So, it's more equipment for the tribe, who even stripped the Harkonnens of their bod's water, which really isn't helping with Jessica's morning sickness. And the Fremen clear out any evidence worm-style before moving on to siege Tabra, where half of the natives are very unhappy about meeting James's off-world killer, while the other half, who follow the prophecies, think he might be their messiah, the Lisan Alib. This is the crux of Stilgar's conversation with the elders, as he's willing to see how things play out by championing Paul, who is a little unprepared for the spicy local cuisine, much to a fan's amusement. Although Chani does confirm he can fight. Meanwhile, the Harkonnen has fully reinvested into Dune in a big display of power, and from Arak Rabban is back in control of the northern desert. But his lack of insight into the southern hemisphere is really stressing him out. Jessica is invited by Stilgar to view the sacred water cache of their base, one of thousands among the tribes, where, as evidenced with Jameis, the Fremen's moisture is returned to the tribe as part of their multi-generational dream of returning Arrakis to a green paradise. This is because he wants her as a Bene Gesserit to replace their own aged Reverend Mother in a dangerous Kool-Aid ceremony that involves drinking the poisonous water of life to transfer across generations of wisdom and memories from every Reverend Mother that came before her. She'll be given centuries of pain and sorrow, but the unexpected element of her pregnancy catches everyone off guard, pulling the developing fetus into full-on premature consciousness with the same level of intergenerational knowledge. She talks to me, and this is not having a very good effect on the mother's mental health. Stilgar comes from the harsh southern reaches where religious zealously is more common, and he's starting to see miracles in action, while Chani and the northern crews almost come to blows over being conned by a fake prophecy. But Paul tells it true, and confirms he's not their prophet come to lead, but simply someone who wants to learn their ways and fight beside them, which appeases the modernists, while also managing to sound religiously humble to the fundamentalists. He trains Paul in the ways of the desert, and info dumps him like an old nan, with a mix of solid advice and spooky stories showing a more colorful side to the Fremen, and Chie takes him under her wing for some improved rhythmic walking and their ways of trapping moisture, before they get back into action and begin disrupting the Harkonnen production of spice, where, in the shadow of a harvester, the Fremen explode up at the last moment into some tight, efficient execution of the Harkonnen. But the air support is no joke, and not really being picky about sides, forcing the team to stay mobile, while Chani preps a bazooka under cover, and Paul keeps everyone off her back. Well, almost everyone, before baiting himself up as a juicy target to give her the opening for a shield-slipping shot, which frees up the rest of them for a last gun finisher. During the after-party, even the doubters relate to his experiences of loss against their shared enemy, with Paul managing to say all the right things about the Fremen's cause being more important than his own individual survival, earning him a place as a Fedaykin, where he adopts the humble mouse name of Muad'Dib, which of course, in Stilgar's eyes, is a powerful name. After trying to explain the alien concept of swimming in the sea to a desert girl, he and Chani get together, and so their time grows with ever-increasingly successful attacks on Harkonnen spice production. And that's making Rabban look weak to his uncle, who's venting off by killing his servants. Tighten your grip, or feel mine on your neck. Meanwhile, Jessica is starting to go a bit Gollum as she talks directly with her unborn precious but kind of creeping out some of the locals, although her ultimate goal is to see Paul protected by really igniting the religious prophecy angle, as well as getting him to drink the water of life to unlock his full potential. So, Paul takes the final test of being a true Fremen by showing no fear and summoning a huge sandworm through the peak of a dune in order to leap on board, which comes with its own risks of fatality. Paul's mother wastes no time enfolding this into the foretold prophecy of his religious ascendancy and sends out her converted zealots to spread the good word. This is setting off alarm bells for Chie, who knows that Paul has had visions of the deaths of billions if he follows his mother's path down in the south, which is where she's heading off to next to stir up the other half of the planet in his name. Even if it does leave a bad taste in Paul's mouth, that's not hope. So, as she heads past the storm's barriers into the black sand of the southern zone, Paul remains a frontline fighter in the north to avoid falling into a god path that would spiral out of his control and instead directly attack the spice deposits of Arryn itself. This makes the Beast Rabban respond in force, swarming to the skies and using cyberpunk trackers to hunt down the rats. I've lost them, but his frustrations are boiling over, and he fires blindly at their last known location before heading in on foot with his assault team, who start to get picked off by Freeman shadows before he finally realizes he's walked into a zero-visibility sand trap and makes a run for it, whilst he still has some ships left, where his tail starts to really tuck between his legs when even the average female Fremen warrior almost has what it takes to hardcore him out of action before getting scoped. So that's life out in the desert. But way over on the Imperial homeworld, the Emperor himself has of course kept quiet about supporting the Harkonnen, and his own daughter, who herself is trained by the Bene Gesserit, has started putting the pieces together to recognize that the Fremen's new prophet is acting more like an off-world insurgent that's been trained by one of them. What if Paul Atreides were still alive enough? This must not come out well. Paul might still be their viable supermind, but the Bene Gesserit have no qualms about playing all the sides, and via the hyper-capable Lady Margot Fenring, are also keeping an eye on another of their bloodline prospects, the Baron's other nephew, Feyd-Rautha. It's his birthday. The psychotic killer is celebrating a grand day in the gladiatorial fighting pit of Giddy Prime, under a black sun that desaturates the planet under the open sky, creeping out everyone and casually killing his own body servants to test out his new knives, much to the pleasure of his pet cannibals. Although these shows are actually safe displays, with the last Vivitrezlaves drugged useless for the killing, the Baron has left one of them fully compass menaced, which, despite smelling of betrayal, actually delights Feyd, who now has a real fight on his hands after all. This, in turn, makes the populace really get behind their Harkonnen as he steps up to show everyone who he truly is, with the crowd relishing in his victory for real now. He is still understandably pissed. How to drown you in that tub, but overall learns to appreciate the bigger picture, especially when he realizes that Uncle Baron is vetting him to inherit the Imperial throne. And that night, Margot goes full-on witch mode to entice and seduce the Harkonnen, and Ayres sinking in a range of neuro-linguistic barbs and hypnotizing him into a dream walk right back to her place for a little sexual imprinting and a test of the box, like Paul securing a squirt of his bloodline along the way and reporting back on his psychological profile for the sake of future manipulation. Damn. OMG. Gurney Halleck is alive, having remained on Dune as a smuggler to steal Harkonnen spice and be a thorn in their side, inadvertently also making themselves a target for Freeman raids. But the fight turned into a glad reunion, and his old teacher is another voice for using all of the Freemen in a revenge war. But Paul explains his visions of the galactic deaths of billions if he does. Because you lose control, because I gain it. He's not trained in the Fremen ways and kind of chafing against their vibe. However, as Duke Leto's former war master, he brings the knowledge that the Atreides arsenal of family atomics, handed down through the generations, in the tradition of all the great houses remains intact. 92 original Atreides family atomic warheads, but Feyd-Rautha has been promoted to take over from his brother, and he's not taking any feedback from the current commanders, who have all been failing under Raban's leadership. You humiliated our family. Kiss or die. Instead, taking the proactive approach of simply systematically turning the northern seats to slag with old-school artillery, avoiding ground combat altogether for the sake of some one-sided destruction. The Harkonnens aren't done here. They've just went back to load the survivors. Must be evacuated. And now even Chie wants him to head south with the convoy, despite Paul's fears for what this will do to them. On top of this, the religious fundamentalist leaders are calling in the clans for a great Freeman meeting, thanks in part to Jessica, who spent her time stirring up a fever and discovering that the sacred water of life, the key to the Bene Gesserit's access to intergenerational memories, is actually made from the bile of the drowned newborn sandworms. So, the path has been laid, and with danger all around, Paul must gain the present awareness that comes with truly being the one in order to give all of the Freemen a chance at victory. And so, they head south where he dips for the sacred temple, as his mother has already laid the groundwork to allow for a forbidden male dosage that is normally lethal to all men, and it sends him into a comatose state so deep he appears to be dead. But Jessica can still detect his vitals enough to keep everyone praying, whilst Paul's conscious experience opens up to the memories of his bloodline progenitors, as well as now allowing him clear visions of the future where Arrakis has been transformed to have a sea, and a grown version of his sister, Aaliyah, welcomes him with a terrible revelation. Chie arrives to admonish everyone for risking her man, but Jessica forces her with the voice to follow her instincts, mixing a drop of her tears into the poison as an XX chromosome key to unlock his comatose state. Overwhelmed that he's still alive, she is also appalled that, having been manipulated into furthering his prophecy, she still remains a fighter for the sake of her own people, despite now being on a break. But that night alone, Paul speaks of his revelation that Jessica is actually the daughter of Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, something that even she only discovered when taking the water of life. And so to survive the future, he shifts from the noble side of his bloodline to the ruthless attitude of the brutal one, stepping out through the Fremen as a different man. Although Chie tries to get everyone to wake up, Gurney still wants to see how things play out for himself, because at the great meeting where only the tribal leaders are allowed to speak, and where an injured Stilgar would give his life willingly for Paul to replace him, the prophet spits their self-destructive custom back in their faces. I'm pointing the way, and calls out a challenge to every single person in the room. It's some serious crowd manipulation, because after getting them emotionally engaged, he then resets their expectations by recounting their personal intimate histories. Because where Paul had previously used subtle cold reading to manipulate others, he's now using genuine superhuman ability to look into the past and secrets of those around him, bowing everyone to his cause. So now all of the Fremen are vibing like Stilgar, and by still embracing his ducal heritage, Gurney is committed as well. So then he openly challenges the Emperor with a little hate mail, and Irulan discovers that his own truthsayer was the one to counsel him into exterminating the Atreides to help keep their bloodline projects under control. But it's backfired. Yeah, the Emperor is going to lose his seat, but whether it's Paul or Fade who inherits the throne, Irulan has been groomed her whole life to be the Bene Gesserit imperial daughter. Ver marries them. So Emperor Shaddam heads down to Arrakis in a big display of power, with his entire Sardaukar army, and sets up his own base, while the Harkonnens react rather anxiously to the surprise audit by alerting all of the other great houses to be witness, just in case it's their own eradication that's on the menu. And Emperor Walken is incredulous at how unaware they are of the uprising on their own planet, slapping down the Baron for incompetency, little realizing they have all fallen into Paul's trap because he's just outside the basin with a massive Fremen army, and uses the family atomics to blast open the mountain walls protecting the city, blowing huge chunks of debris across the Imperial position, and crushing the Sardaukar army, who, to their benefit, are hardcore enough to take it on the chin, only to get swallowed whole by Stilgar's high-speed attack of Leviathan sandworms that pour through the breach, smashing everything to bits just ahead of a sandstorm that sucks up the aerial defenses. From the other side, Chie leads the Fadakan warriors in a brutal ground assault, where the finest fighters outmatch Vader as an echo of Paul's earlier visions, suddenly putting everyone on the back foot, while the freeway pins are completed by Gurney, who moves in on Arrakeen itself to flood the streets with soldiers under the Atreides banner and call out Rabban for a moment of direct personal revenge for my Duke. It's a decisive victory, and Paul marches right on up past everyone to stick his grandfather like a pig. He's done, like an animal, leaving his body for the desert. He takes a moment to tell Chie, "I will love you as long as I breathe." But his mother is right about having to play the Game of Thrones under the witness of the great houses, calling out an official grudge match on the Emperor, and even outvoicing his witch scoos. And so it's Fade Rautha Harkonnen who steps up as the Emperor's champion. Cousin, is that right? And where Paul has had to kill to survive, with Fade it's more like his favorite form of expression, able to stand toe-to-toe and adapt to Paul's techniques, outmaneuvering his acrobatic groundwork, and taking special note of Chie before sinking Paul's own crysknife into his side, much to the despair of the crowd. Paul's already seen that he can't stop Fade from stabbing him, so instead, he lets it happen, accepting the inevitable, distracting everyone from the fact that he's pulled out his own knife in return. Fade tries boning some snarky psychic remarks between the Reverend Mothers, and forcing the former Emperor of the known universe to bend down and kiss his ring. Oh my god. And so Paul is to marry Irulan to inherit the throne. But with all of the other great houses refusing to accept his ascendancy, it's become the very thing he once tried to avoid. The Holy War begins. Heartbroken Chie can't stay because although Paul really is their prophesized superhuman leader, it has nothing to do with God or miracles. He's just the end result of social and genetic engineering that's now using the Fremen as tools at the cost of their own lives. If you've enjoyed our journey through the sands of Arrakis and the epic tale of Dune, be sure to show your support by liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more captivating recaps and thrilling adventures. Until next time, may your dreams be filled with spice and intergalactic wonders.